right. I'm excited. So, hello and welcome to the Mind Blowing Happiness podcast. This is Trish Ajel Roberts, and today we are talking to New York Times bestselling author, healer, and trauma specialist, Resmaa Menakemr. How are you doing today, Resmaa?
I'm doing better now than what you said. So I'm doing good.
Now, I've been chasing him for a while, so if I seem like super excited, it's because he finally slowed down long enough for me to catch him. So I first fell in love with your work when I was actually signed up for a yoga teacher training program. So I already have my 200 certificate and I was going for my 300. And your book was one of the books that we were supposed to read. And when I got into it, I was like, oh my God, who is this person? I've never come across anything like this. So I have just been speaking your praises ever since. I think the
Thank
first
you,
time
sis.
You're welcome. I think the first time I reached out to you was because I was recommending your book in a issue of a magazine that I write for called Natural Awakenings in Atlanta, which is like a holistic healing thing. Yeah. So I want to tell you guys a little bit more about Resmaa. So right now he has two new books, The Quaking of America, an embodied guide to navigating our nation's upheaval and racial reckoning, and Monsters in Love, Why Your Partner Sometimes Drives You Crazy and What You Can Do About It. Resmaa is a longtime therapist and licensed clinical social worker who specializes in the healing of racialized trauma. He's the founder of the Cultural Somatics Institute and the originator and key advocate of somatic abolitionism. And we're going to ask him more about what all that means in a minute. But this was really impressive, so I wanted to make sure to share. For 10 years, Resmaa co-hosted a radio show with former US Congressman Keith Ellison on KMOJ-FM in Minneapolis. He also hosted his own show, Resmaa in the Morning, on KMOJ. And Resmaa has appeared on both the Oprah Winfrey Show. So, you know, at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to just like send her a text message for me.
that was 15, 20 years ago. I don't have to.
So he's been on the Oprah Show, and he's also been on Dr. Phil as an expert on family dynamics, couples in conflict, and domestic violence. He's also been a guest on Charlemagne the God's Comedy Central TV program, The God's Honest Truth, and on iHeartRadio's The Breakfast Club with DJ Envy, which is also amazing and impressive. And I love just so many things that you're doing are things that I aspire to. So it's such an honor to have you on here with me today.
The honor is mine, sibling. The honor is mine.
So my first question for you is, how did you get on this path? Like this path to healing and dealing with racialized trauma? How did that happen?
Yeah, I think, I think I've always, my mom told me when I was born, I was always kind of like leaning into people. She said it terrified her because I would let anybody pick me up. Right. So I think the idea that, that I gravitate towards people, towards kind of like energy has always been something that I think I came on the planet with that. I don't think it's something, I think my career path is an extension from my purpose path and the way that I kind of my particular energy, how my particular energy was needed, is needed in this world in a particular way, and I think it's always been that way for me. And so,
I want to just be clear. So you said your mom said that you wouldn't just let anyone pick you up?
I'd let anybody pick me up. I would let anybody pick me up.
Oh, you would? Okay.
Yeah. And I've always leaned into people. Like I wasn't the kid that was like, I think what terrified my mom was that I would explore things readily, right? And as a parent, that you want that thing that can terrify you, because you know what I mean. And I think I really think my purpose on this planet is kind of like the wandering into places and wandering into areas that are supposed to be off limits to kind of question and interrogate. And so I think, my stuff around racialized trauma came really, it galvanized the way that it galvanized was because I was wandering in Afghanistan. I ended up going to Afghanistan and doing some work over there for 2 years.
I
And
saw
that,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
and that ended up actually, creating so much of a pressure on me that it forced me up in situations that the me that was trying to handle it at the end, that me could not survive going through that thing. I had to actually be somebody else in order to get through that piece. Um, the person that I was before Afghanistan and the person that I am after Afghanistan are not even remotely the same person.
So
Um,
when you practiced in Afghanistan, were you in the military at the time or
no, I
you?
was I was a military contractor.
Okay.
And so my I so when I got the gig over there, there were what a lot of people don't realize is that when America goes to war now, most of the logistic pieces and like how do you get food in and off of base, how do you get the garbage in and off of base, how do you make sure that the plane, like all of that is done by military contractors.
Hmm.
The actual fighting of the wars are actually done by the military, but the a lot of logistical
The
pieces,
logistics.
yeah, that's done by civilians, people like me. So one of the things that happened was is that the particular contracting company that I was working for, they had over 14,000, no, at the time that I landed, they had 17,000 people at 53 military bases in southern Afghanistan and no therapists. So the
Mm.
people were dealing with, divorce and brutalization and rockets coming in and rape and suicide and all that different type of stuff. And they didn't have a therapist. They didn't, not only did they not have a therapist, they really didn't have any supports that helped people kind of navigate that stuff. And so I ended up taking on the job, and that job, I was responsible I had to set up the whole program for all 53 bases. So whenever anything, and it was just me for most of the time. And
I
so
was
when
going to
any
ask, so there were no other therapists?
all the
That's
therapists that would
insane.
come, they only stayed for like maybe a month, 2 months, and then they cracked and they left. They tried to come in there and do what they thought they needed to do rather than actually holding the space for the people. They tried to like, well, I should do this and I should do that. And eventually you do that enough, the structure and the energy of it will crack you. And so for the 2 years I was mostly me. And so whenever a base would get hit by the Taliban or something would happen or people would hang themselves or something like that, my
Mhm.
job was to fly in and go there and process the base and see if there were, if people could access resources that were currently on base or whether or not I needed to discharge them and have them go home and get help and then come back later. So
So that's heavy, heavy work. Now, how did it become, or can you explain somatic abolitionism and if
yeah,
that is
so
connected at
so
all?
it yes, yeah. So in that process, one of the things that happened because I come from and we come from a people who have been conditioned around when you're dealing with people that are in pain, you override your own. You don't pay attention to the pieces that are happening for you. Our
Mhm.
whole bodies, the black body has been conditioned to believe that we're of service to every other body, especially the black femme body or the black female body. Because you know
Mhm.
what I mean? And so what ends up happening is that the things that you should be paying attention to, um, you don't. The things that you should be tending to, you don't. And so I ended up doing that for 2 years and then coming home and going through a very difficult a process of dealing with my own trauma, because the same things that were happening to the people that I was serving was also happening to me. And it was, so I landed, so I did that from 2011 to 2013. And I didn't actually, I came home in 2013, but I didn't actually land until 2015. I didn't actually, I didn't actually, like,
Like process
come,
it.
I didn't, yeah, I wasn't here until 2015.
Wow.
Um, and then all through that time was suicidal stuff and,
Wow.
just a bunch of stuff. Well, that actually started me down the road of really working with my own trauma, and then, you know, being open enough and wandering enough to be able to deal with the energies of my ancestors, kind of helping me with the idea that, you're going through this right now, but think about what your people have gone through. So I
Mm,
was able to kind of hold that at the same time. And so that began this process. That's how I came up with my grandmother's hands. That began this process of exploration, not just in terms of my own trauma, but also the historical, the intergenerational, the persistent institutional, and then your own personal lived experiences and how that all dovetails together. And so that's what burgeoned. It started to begin to birth my grandmother's hands, and then that began to birth somatic abolitionism. And somatic abolitionism is basically the idea that our work is to usher in a living, embodied, anti-racist, generative culture. And that means that we must look at how trauma impacts our bodies
mhm.
somatically. Like it is not just a cognitive piece, it is
Right.
also and so one of the first ways of getting to a more generative culture is actually tending to the somatics, tending to the body as a way to heal, as opposed to just thinking all I got to do is think differently or behave
Right.
differently. So,
Mhm. Thank you for that. That was super helpful.
mhm.
So the topic for today is, does being woke still matter?
Absolutely.
Of course, we know absolutely, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably more now than it has
Than
been
ever.
in a
Right,
while.
right, right.
But I like to pull up definitions. So I pulled up a definition for this.
Mhm.
And I got this one from Merriam-Webster, where they said woke is aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. I thought it was a pretty fair definition. Of course, they had the derogatory definition that's been running around now as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
But I know in The Quaking of America, you have a whole chapter on wokeness.
Yeah.
Um, would you add anything to that?
So first off, if, you know, white folk and people who align themselves with the kind of whiteness philosophical stance, structural stance, they one of the bedrocks of whiteness is colonization, right? And flattening and usurping things and making and taking something that means something to a people, hollowing it out and then making it mean something else. And
Mhm,
so the idea of being awake and
mhm,
wokeness is comes straight out of the Black experience, the Black vernacular, the idea of, getting awake, and the idea of being woke is the idea of being very clear about what's happening to you, not only in the current time, but what is happening and what is and has been happening to you across time, across
mhm.
time and across space. And so the idea of wake wasn't pejorative, right? And now the way that white body supremacy works is that white body supremacy takes the things that you hold dear and makes them pejorative. So even Black people start to reject the idea of being awake and being conscious and being woke for something. And this comes back to my whole thing around, there is a certain place that Black people must protect with a fierceness, and that place is the idea of the kind of the fugitive understanding, right? That sometimes the things that we need to develop as a people is not should not have at its centering piece the white gaze, GAZE, right? Like sometimes we do things that actually should be fugitive. They should be hidden. They should be in the dark. They should be between me and you. Much like when we went to try to learn how to read, we didn't tell everybody that we were trying to learn how to read. We took a candle and went by a tree and shut the hell up, right? And because we knew that our very lives depended on our fugitiveness, not having everybody be able to gaze at what it is that's happening. And so this idea of wokeness, I really think that we have to actually reclaim that from the place of fugitiveness, because our very survival depends on us being able to build and develop things without having somebody who does not have our best interests at heart being able to evaluate. And
Yeah.
when I say people, when I say having other people evaluate it, I'm saying whiteness as a concept that we have, because we have been steeped in it and been around it. We've also ingested things that need to be inquired around white. We've ingested these ideas of whiteness as standard. And so when we begin to kind of think about how do we chart our own ways for liberation, we're also contending with whiteness and the structures of whiteness and the philosophies of whiteness.
Yeah, I wanted to have this conversation purposely using that word because it's been thrown out so much in a
Right.
negative way. And it's an opportunity for us to really define it and reclaim it. And as we continue, I'm going to offer kind of 3 tips for us to, or 3 strategies for us to stay woke. And I'm going to
That's right.
ask for your help doing that.
Mhm.
So I think for me, I just wanted to, I guess, add to some of what you said. You did talk about consciousness. I think also self-awareness, consciousness of your physical body, of your mental body, that all of that is part of being awake,
That's
of
right.
being
That's right.
woke. Um, so I was reading The Quaking of America. It's so powerful, a little terrifying, but you know what? You're bringing to light all the things that I see taking place that make me want to like hide under the bed, right?
That's
Because
right.
I don't really want to deal with it. And
That's
even
right.
in the book, you talk about that, the response
Hmm.
that we have when we see
Hmm.
things happening.
Hmm.
It's kind of like, let me binge watch some TV and not
That's right.
think
That's right.
about it.
That's right. That's right.
But so you definitely sound the alarm on the potential for a civil war in this country.
Hmm.
Now, you wrote the book in 2022, right?
Hmm.
So what are
Hmm.
your feelings now that we are in
Oh
2023?
God. Yeah. So I actually started writing the book in 2021. I actually started writing the book. It was going to be a different book, Siva. That book, originally that book was going to be a book. So when you write a best-selling book, the first thing that your publisher wants is another one of those, right? They want you to write another one of those. And so I couldn't write another one, but what I did do is I said, I could write a book called Our Grandchildren's Souls, right? Rather than My Grandmother's Hands. And what I was going to explore is the idea of legacy. And so
Mhm.
I actually had started writing that book. And then these fools did January 6th.
January 6th. Mhm.
And and me and my wife were sitting there watching it, and we were watching it the whole day,
Did
and
you
we were
watch it
watching.
live? Because I did. I
Yes,
think it
yes,
had
we
a
watched it
different
live.
impact when you
It
saw
was
it
on,
live.
yeah. Because we were watching it, and you know how you watch it and you go and you leave and you come back and you watch and you leave and you come back. Well, we were doing that, and then at one point my wife goes, "Yes." And you watch and you're starting to see all of these people starting to show up,
It was
right?
insane.
It was insane. It was insane. And then sis, when they started climbing the damn walls and they started climbing the scaffolding, and I started seeing
Mhm.
these fools, these cosplayers, these feral cosplayers walking around with the AR-15s, and I'm starting to see the gallows being erected and the nooses being
Oh
erected,
my God.
and then I'm starting to see people with Auschwitz signs on and swastikas. I'm like, whenever I see stuff like that, I always think about, I call it the symbols of our pharaoh past, right? And how
Mhm.
they are not past, they are present, they are living, they are philosophy. And we get caught up when we think about stuff like things like plantations and stuff as being past things, or enslavement as being past things, as opposed to things that have evolved and become and mutated into something else, right? That is not past, it's present. And so when that started happening, and then they started, here's so Quaking of America for me, like I had a sister that before I published the book, I had her read it, right? I said, read this, and just because she had already, and she, it took her like a year and a half to read My Grandmother's Hands, because she was doing the practices, right?
Yeah.
But that's the most important part of my books, are the practices. It's not even
Mhm.
reading the stuff. So she was so I said, read this and then get back to me. Let me know what you think. So it took about a month, and about 2 months, and she came back and she said, brother. I said, yeah. She goes, you got to give people warning on this, brother. She said, I went into this thinking it was going to be another My Grandmother's Hands.
Mhm.
And she said, brother, My Grandmother's Hands was like a warm blanket. This is like a dark alley. And I
Mhm.
said, yeah. I said, that's exactly what I wanted to be, because more than anything, I want Black people to read that, Black, brown, and indigenous people to read this book and go, these fools ain't playing. Like this whole that January 6th was a practice run, right?
Mhm.
And they're learning from the practice run. They're learning how to do this in a slick way. They looking to say, okay, now if I do it like this, I'm going to jail. If I do it like this, I'm going to jail. But what if I do it like this?
And the
What if I do
government
it like
barely held.
that?
You hardly
That's it.
hear people talk about that.
That's right.
A
The
few
only
different people in place, and
That's it.
who
That's
would
it.
think so? Yeah.
That's right. The only thing, here's how you know. Here's so here in the Quaking of America. Here's how you know that white body supremacy is a philosophy and a structural feral philosophy that has deep mooring roots. Hell, this stuff existed before America became America, right? Right, like the plantation existed before the Constitution, right? The plantation existed before, you know what I mean? Land theft and genocide existed before that. And so here's how you know how powerful white body supremacy is. You had these people go to the capital of the United States, kick
Mm.
in doors, key and crap and poop all over the walls and all over the place, right? And beat the hell out of the military police officers. I mean, they were, if they were putting the boots to the police officers there, right? And not one police officer unholstered their weapon. Think about what I'm saying.
You got me thinking
They
about it.
got
So I'll tell you what I'm thinking. Although I
mm,
think, of course, if it was Black and brown bodies, they would have
that's that
dropped something on us. There would have been a whole crowd control drama
that's
from the beginning.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Because like those individual cops, they couldn't just pull out a weapon, you know.
Why couldn't they?
Well, I think the crowd was so large. If one
When
cop
they
pulled
were
out a weapon, he would have guaranteed his own death.
when they started beating and crushing the cops in the doorways, when they started beating the cops with their own weapons, when they started hitting the cops with the flags, if that had been me and you, do
Well,
you
that we
think?
would have never gotten that far.
But just
We would have never, like, we couldn't even have been up in those trees.
what do you think?
Like before, like we probably couldn't even have just walked towards the Capitol. It would
That's
have
what I'm
never gotten there.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I tell people that the white body has currency. That there is the white body. When I say white body supremacy, I am saying that that we live in a structure by which the white body deems and has deemed itself the supreme standard by which all bodies humanity shall be measured.
And
And even the police officers knew that.
I couldn't agree more. And I recommend your work, not just to Black and brown bodies, but certainly to white bodies, definitely to, I think you call them police bodies or officer bodies, or how do you call them? I think
I made a mistake by saying that in my grandmother's hands. You know how sometimes when you write stuff that you don't realize the kind of the kind of bottleneck you put yourself in until after you write it. And one of the things that that 10 years from now, when I write the the 10-year anniversary of my grandmother's hands, I am going to take out police bodies, because what I ended up doing was equating a body with a vocation, and I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. It's
maybe one of authority or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah. I wouldn't even equate that with bodies. It was a bottleneck that I couldn't, like, I could not. I had to write it in order to see that it was a bottleneck. And so now, whenever anybody says that to me, I make that correction, because I
understand the conundrum though, because it made sense in a lot of ways, the description of the behaviors, but it was kind of removing the humanity, of the person.
Exactly. Yeah.
But listen, I've got a lot that I want to talk to you about. So
okay, let's go.
So I thought you did a really great job explaining something that I've had a really hard time explaining in The Quaking of America. And that is that wealthy, powerful landowners in Virginia created this idea of white supremacy in the 1600s to allow a small group of people to protect, maintain, and increase their power. And to divide and repress, any challenge to that power. And we see it now because the wealth gap has increased. You've got these billionaires on one side, and you still have poor white folks with no health insurance on the other side.
Voting for the billionaires.
Voting for the billionaires, yes. And I see you love language the way I do. So you called it malevolent genius, which I thought was good. Sure. And history's most enduring scam. And I think that most working class or poor white folks don't understand that this is the system that they are in, that they're being gaslit. So I thought that was really great that you pointed out. And we already spoke about the fact that Black and brown people were gaslit too,
That's exactly right.
Self-loathing, and we believe in white supremacy.
That's right.
And all of those things. So the question I have for you before we get into the 3 strategies I want to share and talk about is, do you think that Black and brown people should be having any particular conversation with white people right
now? No. I'm serious.
That's why I asked.
Sibling, our work is to create a living, embodied, anti-racist, generative culture. And white folks don't even know what the hell we're talking about. I'm not talking about white people being nice and kind. I want you to be nice and kind. I don't want you to spit in my soup. But that is not the same thing as developing a culture, a living, embodied, anti-racist, generative culture. Your audience, white folks. This is why I talk to people about that race has a charge to it. It is not just a cognitive piece. It has a charge to it. So when you are talking to white folks about race and you watch them do things like cry, or white women start tearing up, and you're talking to them around race, or you're talking to a white guy and this rage response, and you're just like, dude, like, what are you like? Why are you so mad? Like, what you're watching is energy that has never been interrogated. Collectively, white bodies have no collective agility or efficacy when it comes to race. None, because they haven't had to. The idea that their very existence depends on them understanding race is not a consideration for them. Me and you cannot operate in this current structure and not know the vibe of race. not knowing the image and the cognition of race, not knowing the meaning and the meaning making from one moment to the next moment of race. We couldn't survive by not understanding that. Our very survival depends on that. Whether that survival is in a corporation, working for somebody, paying a mortgage, raising children, interacting with the police, whatever that is, our survival depends on us understanding the vibe of race. That is the exact opposite collectively when we're talking about white bodies. The
Okay.
exact opposite.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I have to say, I've had that experience of having a conversation about race with a white woman who started crying. She's more, she's more upset than I am. Just, how confusing is that, So yes, that's good, because I think a lot of times we do spin our wheels trying to have a conversation that's just never going to make sense.
And the labor ends up being back on us.
100%.
No.
I'm actually, I do diversity talks, and I have one coming up in Chicago next month, and with any of the talks that I do, it ends up being a conversation around what your next step is. Are you going to read a book on your own? Are you going to educate yourself? Like, you spending an hour with me is not going to change anything. Are you going to work on changing your level of compassion, your level of humanity? Will you invest some time in that? So, yeah.
Let me add a piece of that. Are you going to get together with two other white bodies and commit that one of us, we're going to do this piece for the rest of our lives, and our commitment to each other is one of us is going to bury the others. That's the commitment. This is not about just reading a book and swapping sourdough bread and kale recipes. It is about how
you hit it right there.
It is about, are you going to commit to ushering in a living embodied anti-racist generative culture? Are you going to do that with two other white bodies? And you three are going to do this in an embodied way for the rest of your lives. If you're not, otherwise you're talking about performance and cosplay. And I have no interest in giving my labor to your performative cosplay and fun.
I gotcha. So I put together 3 main strategies to stay woke, and I'm going to kind of walk us through them. So the first one, and again, when I say woke, I guess we're with this idea of awareness, attentiveness, consciousness. So the first one is taking care of your physical body. For me, I think of the normal things: nutrition, water, movement. I love yoga. I think yoga is a very healthy practice. Breath work, you teach a lot of those things. Can you talk to us about bodies and logic? I know you talk about that in the book.
So we've been conditioned, like I said, we've been conditioned in a structure that says that cognition and logic and facts are the only intelligences we should pay attention to. But as Black people, as people who are descended from first representation of humanness on this earth was a Black woman, was an African woman. And so we are descended from that. And so, and we are connected to creation itself. We are not divorced from creation. We are part of creation. And so what ends up happening is that idea, that rubric, that logic is the only way to kind of navigate this stuff, truncates what's actually available. We can actually pick up, like I talked about before, creation operates off of vibes and vibrations. Also, our bodies are both antenna and receivers and amplifiers, right? And so we pick up on things, right? We don't have a culture that has cultivated those things that we pick up as real knowledge, right? So we think that logic we can think our way through everything. If I can just think about this differently, if I could just do that, if I could just analyze this thing and the right answer, and now I can fix this thing. And what creation has shown us is that if you don't begin to cultivate the other intelligences, and you're just left with the logic, you are going to be depleted. You will eventually be depleted of your life energy because you are trying to so if the tube of logic is that long, is that wide, you're trying to cram in all of this other energetics in there, and eventually you're going to be depleted. And so when what I say is you must start with the conditioning of your body, not just your physical corporal body, but individually and communally, your energetic body. You have to begin to temper and condition that so you actually have more room to be able to hold and work with the idea of race and the energetics of race, as opposed to thinking that just because you have an idea or you can logically think about it, that you're going to be able to work with that.
Yeah, and I think that that's the response that we hear many times from people who identify as white. They say, well, I don't think that way.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's where it stops. They don't, they think that, they say, I don't think that way. And so therefore I don't have any way of accessing community. I don't have any, because if I don't that way, then that's where it stops. Because now it's about whether or not I'm a good person or a bad person,
right?
Not whether, you know what I mean? Not whether or not I can be conditioned to usher in a living, embodied, anti-racist generative culture, right? That would involve other people. That would involve developing a communal glue. That would involve grinding on people. That would involve getting mad at each other and dealing with the energies around trust and mistrust, and then coming back and working it some more, and then seeing what emerges from that.
When you say embodied culture, I totally understand you. When you say generative, what do you mean?
So what I mean by generative is that there is something that is happening. Let me say it like this. Close your eyes for a second. There is a famous biologist who studies butterflies, and he says this piece, and I think this will bring home the idea of generativeness. He says, it is the job of the caterpillar to resist the emergence of the butterfly. That in the caterpillar's resistance of the emergence of the butterfly produces the mechanisms that need to take place for the butterfly to come about. That the decay of the caterpillar creates the nutrients for the butterfly. Right? And so when I'm talking about generativeness, that's what I'm talking about. This idea that the current structure can provide the nutrients for the structure that we want to
create, to manifest,
to create and be emergent, right? And so generativeness is this concept of there is an emergent quality of something that has more room and more capacity and more openness and more expansiveness.
I'm so glad I asked that question.
Yeah,
that was a beautiful, beautiful answer. So can you talk to us about what you call bimbas? I don't know if I'm saying, I think I'm saying it wrong.
So this was the first. So all of my work, I really try and work with it in the idea of generativeness, in the idea of emergence, in the idea of pregnancy, in the idea of birthing. And in the idea of that blackness, I'm talking about, when I say blackness as principle, I'm talking about the blackness of the womb, blackness of the tomb, the blackness of things that could
like the unborn,
the unborn, something that wants to emerge forth, right? And I just lost your question. What did you say? What was your question again?
Oh no, I was just trying to move into bimbas.
Yeah, okay. So when I first did my grandmother's hands, I called it bimbas. And now I'm talking about it because my work emerges and evolves. I work with it and I talk about it as Vimbasi. And the reason why I call it Vimbasi is that I implied in the images of Vimbas, I implied the idea of imagination, but I think imagination is a literal intelligence itself. So Vimbasi are this what I call the six intelligences: vibes and vibrations, images, thoughts, cognitions, and movement, or images, thoughts, and cognitions, meaning making, behavior and urges.
Mhm.
Um,
I
um,
have them
um,
affect and
yeah,
emotions.
yeah, affect and emotions, sensation and
Mhm.
sensate, and then the last one is imagination.
Ah,
Right,
okay.
right. And so those are what I call the intelligences, right? And our part of our work is to reclaim and work communally with those intelligences when through genocide, through enslavement, through colonization, these structures try to render those things invalid. Part of our work now is to reclaim those pieces in slow, titrated ways so they can become emergent for our children's children. And so these intelligences are literally tied to creation itself. These are emergent intelligences, not the soul intelligences. And so Vimbasi is just my way of conceptualizing ways that we can begin to work in an embodied way, work with these intelligences through the body.
Yes, thank you. And we don't teach children this in school. Everything is, what you can see with your five senses, what you
That's
can
it.
analyze.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah, and it's
But,
not
but
that energy and intuition and
that's
knowing
right.
and just all of those things that are so powerful and so important.
So this philosophy, the philosophy we're currently in, only sees the value of the body and the value of labor as what it can produce. That's why the educational system is created the way that it's created.
I wish I
And
had a bell to ring. Because in the work that I do, I work with mostly women, mostly Black women. And
Mhm.
a lot of what I'm doing is trying to get them to calm their
That's
body,
right. That's right.
to
That's
be
exactly right.
still, to
Right.
not have to constantly validate their life through their production.
That's it. That's one
So,
of the one of the most revolutionary things a Black woman can do is nothing. It's absolutely revolutionary. The Black woman's body has been at the service of everything and everybody. For a Black woman to say, you know what, I'm a nap. Well, what time you gonna be up? It don't matter.
yes, yes, yes.
That's revolutionary, right? The idea, this whole structure is predicated. White body supremacy is predicated on the idea of urgency. And getting Black women to begin, and Black women, Black men, Black femme, Black gay, lesbian, trans people, like getting us to begin to contend with that urgency and begin to slow it down and titrate and nibble on it and understand that the urgency is really at the service of white supremacy. And what can we begin? What did Auntie say? I am reclaiming my time, right?
Yes,
Getting, for us to actually see that as a principle as opposed to a catchphrase is an important piece for us, right? Black women, like the NAP ministry,
yes.
that
I was
does
just
not
saying Trisha Hersey. Yes,
pressure, yeah. That
yes.
that's
Love it.
revolutionary
Yes, all day
for the
long.
Black woman to begin to say, I can reclaim my time and do nothing.
And as you're speaking, for some reason I'm getting images of like Gone with the Wind.
Yeah,
These old
exactly.
images of white
Yeah,
women with
yeah.
handmaidens.
That's right.
They faint, they need
That's right.
a
That's right.
kerchief. Like
That's right.
they're constantly resting. The men are
The
taking care of
constant,
them.
constant. Yeah. But what did
Everyone's
the black?
taking care of them.
But what did the Black women do?
We're doing everything, right?
Everything.
Because they
Milk.
had somebody
Right.
taking care of the baby, somebody cooking the
Nursing
food,
their baby,
somebody making the
nursing
money,
their, nursing their babies, being
nursing their
raped,
baby.
by their husbands,
Yeah, they didn't even have to
watching.
do that. As you were speaking, that is actually the first time that that opposite image showed up in my head. And I have this conversation all the time. So that is actually an excellent tool that I can take forward to my clients. because it's so hard sometimes to get out of your own head.
Exactly right.
But if you think of those images
Yeah.
of being taken care of, it's just,
That's right.
yes, that was excellent.
It is literally revolutionary for a Black woman to do nothing.
Because if you do, the first thing is you're lazy.
You're lazy. And for Black women and Black people to just pause on that and work with it individually and communally, as opposed to trying to, well, I need to prove my worth. So I need to even do more. And there is no, see this whole structure, this is what I tell people. This whole structure has no value for your labor, because this very structure has been predicated on free labor and free land. So everything about this structure wants to get you to do work for free, right? That's the whole thing. This is why they got rid of pensions, right? And fooled us into thinking that the 401k was the same thing as a damn pension.
And I was right there with them, being
That's right.
gaslit.
That's right. It's the slide towards like the ultimate rubric for these structures, for these corporations. The ultimate rubric is, how do we pay as less as possible for labor? Because our concept of labor is enslavement. Our concept of labor is genocide. Our concept of labor is free land. And
you got me speechless right now, because when you said our concept of labor is enslavement and genocide, I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, that's why we're the richest country in the world, right? Don't pay for anything.
And so when we as labor, when we say, well, wait a minute, can I get a cost of living? Can I get some health care? Can I get this? You're lazy. Why would you want that? You shouldn't want, and we go and say,
I'd like to eat. I'd like to be able to eat.
That's right. That's right. And we shrink and we go, well, maybe I shouldn't want. Right? Nah, that's not that. Listen, you are in a perpetual battle for your own body sovereignty.
And that leads me to my next comment, actually, perfectly. So one thing that I loved in your book is that you said to think about your body as a toy box or a goodie bag. And I'm going to steal that a little bit too with my clients.
Steal it all. Take it all.
Because there's so much shame around the body, one around the inactivity. I'm not constantly doing something. And then the other one is just being able to have joy and pleasure in being in your body. So I just love that.
That's exactly right. The reason why I talk about it, body as a toy box as opposed to a toolbox, is that a toolbox, we always think when you say tools, how can I get more tools? With the concept is that if I get the right tool, I can fix this problem. If there's a problem, there's a right tool to fix that problem. And what I say to Black people, and people who study with me in somatic abolitionism, is let's say start trying to work with your body around a toy box, exploration, playing, wiggling, pumping, curiosity, those different types of, there's a practice in quaking where I say, get in front of a mirror, full-length mirror, and start taking off your clothes, right? And start to begin to notice the disgust you have for your own body. Start to begin and stop. Don't just barrel through it. Just like, I'm getting ready to take off my shirt and I'm noticing I want to cover back up, and sit with the grief and sit with the disgust. Sit and notice when there's spaces where when that disgust and that stuff is not there. Like, the more you nibble on that and work with it over time, the more capacity you may begin to build and have. Right. And so that's why I do that piece. That's why I like to tell people this: if you want to know about how much you are repulsed by your own body, just get in front of a full-length mirror and start taking off your clothes without turning to the side, without getting your best side.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was the kind of the first strategy for staying woke. The second one is taking care of your mental health, your non-physical body. I think of that as meditation and spirituality, safe spaces. You were talking about a little bit before. I think safe spaces are extremely important. Therapy, which you're very familiar with, of course, you're expert in, as well as coaching, which is what I do. I imagine you may do some coaching as well. And also getting your hands on books like your books or my books. You know, sometimes you don't have access to the coaching and the therapy, but you can get your hands on a podcast or a book. So what are your thoughts around, or do you have any additional thoughts around?
Just one. Pause. Just pausing for 2 seconds, noticing. When I pause, what's the quaking? What's the piece? You don't have to stay there. Just pause and then go do something. Then come back and get another rep in. Notice what's the thing that I keep trying to move away from or get around. Just notice it. You don't have to ask why. You don't have to inquire. Just notice. And over time, you start to get more conditioned around being able to contend with pause and the quaking back and forth. And then other things start to emerge as you start to begin to tend.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And I would imagine you're familiar with restorative yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a thing? Man, the things that have come up out of me and my body and my spirit when I got still in that kind of practice is just amazing. And I've had folks, who they look at you and it's like everybody just looks like they're kind of lying around, but there's so much that takes place in
exactly
stillness.
Right. Think about it as the caterpillar and the butterfly. You can look at the cocoon and say nothing's happening there, and everything's happening. Yes.
You are giving me my butterfly metaphors today, and I am loving it. I am here for it. So one of my favorite quotes from you is from my grandmother's hands, where you said, "Healing involves discomfort, but so does refusing to heal. And over time, refusing to heal is always more painful." Can you talk about that just a little bit?
So this comes with the concept of what I talk about: clean pain, dirty pain, right? And this is not about good pain, bad pain. As adults, we don't get a choice between pain and no pain most of the time. We get to choose between pain that gets us around things and pain that gets us to go through things and build more capacity, right? Anybody that's ever been through a divorce or a breakup with somebody that they love their dirty draws and then they, that there are times where when you look back on it, you go, you know what? Constantly gave up myself in that situation. And now there was a dirtiness to it. What if I would have just gone through it? There's pain in both. And sometimes as adults, we want a third choice, and you don't get a third choice. And so you make a choice around which type of pain you're going to contend with or discomfort you're going to contend with. And then another choice emerges after you make a choice. You make choices about that. And so for me, this idea that pain, that the avoidance of pain is what we all should be aspiring to and trying to avoid, really brings us right back to ourselves most of the time. And so that's how I kind of think about it.
Yeah, it's I guess when I think of it as going through the fire, versus circling in and circling in and circling, and not dealing with what needs to be dealt with.
Well, sometimes the circling it is preparatory. Sometimes the circling it is actually the conditioning that you need to do in order to be able to actually go through it. Sometimes you got to do the same stuff over and over and over again to where you get to a point and you go, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I ain't doing that no more. I'm not doing that. Right? We're not doing this. Well, what you said today, yeah, I know what I said, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah, or like I've circled for 5 years. We're not circling for another 5 years.
We're not circling for another, right? And the way you are able to get to a place where you say I'm not circling for another 5 years is that you had to do the circling first in order to condition and temper you to be able to get to a point where you go, I'm not doing that for another 5 years, right? And so to me, this idea of emergence and kind of like fugitive pieces is really kind of like important. Like A lot of times we're so brutal on ourselves when we don't get stuff the first time.
Mhm.
And as Black bodies, we have to be gentler with ourselves. We just have to.
So in your books, you offer a lot of kind of body exercises. I know,
Practices, I call it. Yeah.
yeah, I know for me,
Mm.
one that I come to over and over and over again is just taking cleansing breaths, right? Do you have like a favorite that you like to use
Yeah.
frequently or teach frequently? What would that
Yeah.
be?
That's the naked one, the mirror one,
Ah,
the mirror one. Because it brings you up against your limitations and your virtues. It brings you right up against there at the same time and asks you to begin to work with the energy as opposed to trying to move around it. Right? That one. That's that one. When I've worked with clients in the past and said, okay, go do, here's the practices that you work at. That's the one that has so much emergence. That one emerges a lot of stuff. Stuff around femme, stuff around masculine, stuff around projective, stuff around receptive, stuff around um, sexuality, stuff around the poop, around my belly, stuff around my hips, stuff around cellulite,
mhm.
stuff around disgust, stuff around purging, stuff around annihilation, like all of that different type of stuff. So that's the piece. I go when I do that with clients, I do it very slow.
Mm.
I introduce it. I don't keep coming back to it. I give a lot of space for
Mm. Mhm. Okay. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking I do a lot of like body work, mirror work, like what you're talking about. And also in the shower, I call it a gratitude shower where I
it.
just
That's right.
appreciate the function
That's
of
exactly right.
my body,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
as I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking, I bet you there's someone listening who never looks at their body.
Never. Most of us don't. Most of us have never looked at our bodies. Most of us know more about our partner's bodies than our own bodies. Right? Most of us most of us have never held our body parts in our hands except for utilitarian purposes. Most of us have never just held our butts in our hands or our penises in our hands just to hold them, or our chest in our hands, or our shoulders or touch parts of our bodies, right? Or held that belly piece, right? Just held it. Most of us haven't done that.
Sometimes I have to remember that I'm a little bit of a weirdo. Because all of those things like I are very natural to me. It has always been
Yeah,
very comfortable to me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when you started and you said that you were like this curious explorer, it
yeah.
reminded me of a story that my mother would always tell about how I ran away from home when I was 2 years old. So, did you do
Me
something?
too. Me too. I put on my combat boots and a jacket, and they didn't know where I was at.
That's so funny. I had a diaper and a chicken leg, and I was in Brooklyn, and they found me like 2 blocks
Yeah,
later.
same way, same thing. Down the hill by Martin Luther King Library.
It's like, wasn't anybody watching me? But I just think that's so funny. Yeah, I was gone.
That's it.
You're the first
That's
person I heard with a similar story.
that's the wandering. This world needs us. We go to we go to places that people say you shouldn't go there. We Boy, let me see. Right?
And a very questionable fearlessness at times.
Yeah, yeah. We get into trouble like that too, right? But the element of it is that there's an exploration, there's a fugitive, there's a trickster quality that we have to explore and hold. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the last one, the last strategy to stay woke, and this is really a lot of what you cover in the Quaking of America. Be aware, prepare. Be aware of history, your current events, your physical surroundings, preparing your home and your neighborhood. And I'd just like you to talk a little bit more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, yeah. We have a tendency to look at things as facade, right? So, white man going into General Dollar and just murdering only black people and murdering black women and pregnant women, going into a school and doing it. So we think of it as episodes, and this country is structured on black structure, right? The black destruction of towns, black destruction of bodies, black destruction of the structure of Black idea and the spirit murder of Black people. And we as Black people have to begin to actually think about ourselves or think about these things less as episodic, as more structural, and then create a generative culture that can usher in something for us and our people in a different way. We can't use the same tools, the same structure, the same philosophy that's being used. We have to actually go out, like the things that we know to be true are really the places where we're the most unsafe. We actually have to explore outside of the things, outside of the churches, outside of the mosques, outside of the book, outside of those things. We'll begin to cultivate the things that we know to be true or know or have some sense may be true, and start moving and start exploring those things. Start grabbing the chicken leg and walking down the street, right? You know what I mean? And so that's the way I think about it, that this preparedness is really a preparedness, not in order to thwart the white man with the hood that's going to be knocking on my door, but to prepare us for a more generative culture for our children's children.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate this.
Thank you. I think this was a beautiful conversation.
I do too.
I don't know if there's anything that I missed that you would want to add. We definitely
I-
want to know if you have projects and where we can find you.
Yeah, I actually I have a new new children's book that a somatic children's book that's coming out. And I'm actually giving away 100,000 copies for free. I'm in the process of trying to raise the money, doing some GoFundMe stuff and talking with some philanthropic organizations. So I'd love to have you promote that.
Where would they go, to your regular site?
So if they go to resmaa.com, if they go to
Okay.
resmaa.com, there will be a pop-up, and that pop-up will have the GoFundMe right there.
I love that. We definitely need to get to the children.
Yeah, this is it's for ages 3 to 8. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's exciting. So thank you. I hope that everyone enjoyed this episode of the Mind Blowing Happiness podcast. You can visit my website, which is trishajelroberts.com, and book a call with me. We can talk about Mind Blowing Happiness private coaching, Passion Quest 6-week mind, body, soul refresh for Black women, the Ghana Soul Healing Retreat, which is for Black families, Finding Freedom book coaching, and more. I will help you get clear on your goals and if and how I can support you on your journey. Let's turn fear into love. Thanks, Resmaa.
Thank you, Sibylla. Talk to you soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.